All right, continuing with the rest of this 7.2 file, we left off on slide number 5. You are going to be solving some of these equations now. Okay, and it says use the zero product property to solve. The zero product property sounds confusing. It's not really at all. All it means is if you have an equation like number 1 here, and you see that it's equal to 0. See how it's equal to 0? And you see that these two things are being multiplied. Well, think about when you're multiplying. If you're multiplying two numbers and they equal 0, right? That means one of them has to be 0. So it's like 0 times 4 equals 0, right? Or negative 5 times 0 equals 0, right? All that means is that one of the two numbers has to equal 0. That's all that means. So basically, if you want to solve this for x, what number, if you had x minus 5, what number, if you plugged in for x, would make it equal to 0? The number 5, right? If you had 5 minus 5, that's going to equal 0, right? And then here, if you have 2 minus 2, that's going to equal 0. So x equals 5, x equals 2 are your two answers. Because 5, if you plugged in, you would get a 0 in the first parenthesis, and 2, if you plugged in, you would get a 0 in the second parenthesis. So those are your two solutions to this equation. You're just thinking of the numbers that, if you plugged it in, would make it equal 0. So like this one, very simple. What number, if you plugged it in where x is, would make this equal 0? Well, 7, right? Now this one, if you plugged in a negative 4, that one would equal 0, because negative 4 plus 4 equals 0. So those are your two solutions. This is called the zero product property. Just basically, you have to just come up with two numbers that make these parentheses equal to 0. So this one, you could probably already know the answer is going to be negative 1. This one is going to be negative 9. Those would make the parentheses equal to 0. And then finally, this one right here, well, see how this x is alone right here? That just means the only number that could make that equal to 0 is 0 itself. That you could consider x in its own parentheses right there. So basically, the only number that works there is 0. And then the other one's going to be negative 6. Those are your two answers for those. Okay? So now we're going to, let's do one more. Actually, we'll do two more. You have to factor these now and then solve them. All right, so we're going to factor using the GCF method. So the GCF of 2 and 8 is going to be 8, or 2, I'm sorry. And the GCF of x squared and x is going to be x. So the GCF for this one is 2x. So if you recall back to yesterday's lesson, we're going to take our GCF and put it on the outside. Okay, and then on the inside, you got to think about what you need to multiply by to get back the original. So 2x times x will give us 2x squared. And then 2x times positive 4 will give us 8x. So that is now factored using the GCF method. And then we're gonna basically do what we just did above. What numbers do x have to equal to make these things equal 0? So basically in the orange parenthesis, you're gonna have the number 0. That's the only way 2x could equal 0 is if x is 0. And then this one's gonna be negative 4. And that's it, it's solved. Let's try this last one right here. Number 2. We'll save the rest. So the GCF of a squared and 5a is going to be, there's no number GCF. There's a 1 and a 5. The GCF is just 1, which really just means you don't even have to write it. The GCF of a squared and a is a. So we're going to write our a on the outside. Then we're going to write on the inside basically what we need to multiply by to get back to a squared. So we're going to need an a there. And then what do we need to multiply by to get back to 5a? We need a 5 there, plus 5. And then finally, we're going to write our two answers. What numbers for a would make these equal to 0? Well, the number 0 itself and the number negative 5. And that's it. Those are your two